Welcome everyone to the second Knowledge Festival panel discussion. This is the second in our 2024 Knowledge Festival discussions at Oxford HR. Oxford HR is a global leadership consultancy, and my name is Caroline Gozzi. I'm a principal here in the sustainability and ESG practice sector. So thank you very much for everyone joining us live today and also joining us as a recording at a later date. We will be having questions on this as well at the end, so feel free to add them in the Q&A box and we will share them and go through them at the end if we've got time to do so. We are going to be talking today about the challenges surrounding talent acquisition in the sustainability and ESG space. And I'd like to thank our panel members today for joining us, and I'll run through introductions as well. We all have background in working in sustainability and ESG, so it seems very appropriate for us to be talking about this subject. So as I said, I work in sustainability and ESG, and I'm part of the team here at Oxford HR. I've got about 25 years of experience of working in sustainability and ESG, starting in consultancy and consulting houses and working predominantly with energy companies, and then moving into professional services, looking at both sustainability and general management consulting issues around business performance and organizational change. I also spent some time working for a socially responsible investment fund in Australia, managing their research team. So kind of done a little bit of both sides of things on both sides of the world, I guess you could say. And it's my pleasure to be here as part of the Oxford HR team today. And joining me today, we have Anna Burrage, and she is a sustainability and strategy consultant and also a local councillor for Camden in London in the UK. We have Andy Clarke, and he is the head of sustainability and public affairs for UK and Ireland for Bayer. And we have Justin Keeble, and he is the managing director for global sustainability at Google Cloud. So thank you for everyone joining us today. And it would be great to hear a little bit more from each of our panel members on what they do and also their route to where they are right now, because we're all in the sustainability space, but all come from slightly different places and taken different paths. So Anna, if we kick off with you, it'd be great to hear a little bit about what you do now and how you got there.
Thank you, Caroline. It's been a circuitous, I'm not sure that's the right word, a long path to where I am now, bumpy in parts, I would say. So I am indeed a sustainability strategy consultant, part-time, but actually increasingly full-time local councillor in Camden. It has a way of kind of taking over your life if you let it, so I try not to. I actually started out, though, as a high-energy particle physicist, working at a lab in Hamburg in Germany. So it was a precursor, if you like, to the CERN latest iteration, smashing particles together at very high energy. So in fact, nothing to do with the energy sector itself, but has that name in common. And I moved from that into a benchmarking consultancy in the city, which did actually work within the energy sector. And I was working on benchmarking for oil and gas companies. This was in the early 2000s. Did a few years there, globe-trotting, very exciting at the time. And then I was hired into the energy team at Booz Allen Hamilton, as was, which has gone through various incarnations. Those within the sector know, and is now part of Strategy and with PwC. But I left there about 12, 13 years ago. I built a horrendous carbon footprint at the time, which forever I will atone for, I think. But it was, as I say, very exciting seeing global clients. They sponsored me through the Sloan Fellowship Programme at London Business School, which was an MSc rather than an MBA in leadership and strategy. And from there, I went on to work with lots more clients, but got involved in business coaching as well, which is a different facet to the consulting toolkit. Worked on lots of fascinating projects with Booz, many still in the oil and gas sector, but then started to migrate towards the sustainability field whilst I was there, and helped lead on a piece of work with the senior partnership and the senior advisors to the firm on what was termed at that point in time the low carbon agenda. And that really was about trying to raise our clients' awareness of this forthcoming change in the way that they would have to operate. And of course, we couldn't foresee what all the changes would be that were coming through, but it was certainly something that people needed to have on their radar. Life, as I said, doesn't always go in straight lines. Children, moving continents with my husband's job. Yes, lots of other interesting things going on in life has taken me out of the straightforward career trajectory, if you like, for over a decade. But I wouldn't have given it up for a moment. And now I guess I'm trying to kind of rebuild something of a professional career in the sustainability sector. But interestingly, my personal interest in politics has taken me, I've always been an opportunist. It's taken me into local government. And there I've opened up a different world of sustainability, because in fact, the job of a councillor is almost all ESG one way or another. It's looking after your local environment, determining what the rules are about what happens in your home patch. Social, obviously looking after people's health and well-being. And then the governance side is sitting on scrutiny panels and looking at how things are actually delivered in practice. So it's been, yeah, really interesting insights into really how to impact my close environment in a way that I would not have anticipated, 15 years ago. So that's where I am now, and happy to discuss further as we go through this.
Great, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you. Andy, would you like to share a bit more about kind of how you got to where you are now at Bayer?
Thanks,
I
Caroline.
think it's a very different kind of different path from both Anna and myself.
Absolutely. So lovely to meet everybody. Lovely to be here today. And yes, Caroline, I do have a completely different kind of direction that my career is headed in. So Andy Clarke, I know it says Andrew, but please keep it informal. I am a salesperson. I used to introduce myself as a recovering salesman, but I think that puts a disservice to kind of the world of people in commercial and sales roles. But I had 17 years of my career started in sales, in increasingly senior sales and commercial leadership roles, and working across different industries such as FMCG, the fast-moving consumer goods area, beauty, and now I've been in the healthcare and pharma space for the last 10 years. That helped me really kind of see kind of an organization from a sales perspective, with the customer being king, but then also having to work and flow within each department. And that brings me on to where I got to next, because 3 years ago, I pivoted in my career. I really fancied something different. And I identified that in our organization, we didn't really talk about sustainability very much. We didn't have a great story to go and tell our customers about, and they were asking more and more questions, and we couldn't answer those questions. So I was able to pivot in my career and really set up the sustainability agenda at Bayer and within the UK and Ireland. And it almost started from complete scratch to where it is today. My remit, my job, my team, we cover all areas of sustainability. So from the carbon accounting and carbon footprinting area to the non-financial disclosures and reporting area, employee engagement, external engagements, etc. So me and my team, we cover all of those areas. And I had to be self-taught in that sense, and have built my credentials over the last 3 years. I'm an alumni for the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. That was an incredible experience, but also great to kind of look at that exposure further afield. And to finish off, I just say every small part, every small action that people can play in the sustainability game are really important. And I talk about that all building together to form one big agenda. And that's the kind of message that I portray to all of my teams and all of the people in our organization, that we can all play a part regardless of what role you have in the organization, and depending regardless of how small or big. But lovely to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thanks so much, Andy, for the introduction. And Justin, last but not least, it'd be great to hear a bit more about kind of how you got to where you are now, what you do now.
Thank you very much, Caroline. So I have been working in this space since kind of the mid to late 1990s. I'm currently leading sustainability for Google Cloud, as Caroline said, which is one of Google's product areas. So when you think about Google, you think about Android, search, YouTube, these are all product areas, and cloud is one of those. And my focus is working to apply our cloud and AI technologies to help our corporate customers address their sustainability challenges, because at the heart of many of these topics is a data challenge, and increasingly companies are having to manage larger volumes of data, and they need some of these heavy, sophisticated tools that we can power through cloud technologies. I actually started my career, I did a couple of environmental sciences degrees, and then I had an in-house role for a retailer in London through the late 1990s. And then I went into consulting for about 22 years, including 14 years with Accenture, where I was one of the founders, together with a bunch of others, to build a commercial consulting business, and became a managing director at Accenture in 2011, and worked cross-industry, oil and gas, CPG, financial services, worked with the World Economic Forum and the UN Global Compact and other similar organizations that were trying to kind of catalyze corporate action on sustainability, but increasingly got interested in the role of technology, particularly because of Accenture's focus. And that's what drew me to Google about 3 years ago. So yeah, super excited to be here and to explore this topic further.
That's great. Thank you so much, Justin, for sharing. We've all come from different places. Some of us, and a very, very science background, and energy focused, and Justin sort of, the consulting route, and Andy sort of actually from nothing to do with sustainability, from sales coming into sustainability. And we're all, and myself, kind of partly energy, partly consulting, partly kind of a mixture of different things, and general management consulting, but all work in this space. And we've all seen it sort of change a lot over the last 20 years, particularly I'd say in the last 5 to 10 years. How do you think the talent market has changed in the last 5 to 10 years in particular? I mean, the issues have kind of grown in awareness and more on the mainstream, which is fantastic, because I know there were many things, when we spoke about it, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, they were sort of little things on the sideline of an ESG team. And now, they're on the CEO agenda. What kind of impact do you think that has made on the availability of talent and the type of talent, both from a supply and a demand side? I'll open that out to any of you to
Caroline, shall I kick off?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think there's a couple of important principles that would be good to kind of, I think, be clear about up front, which is when we talk about sustainability in an organizational and corporate context, we're really talking about transformation. That actually organizations need to rewire their businesses or their organizations so that the net product of their core purpose is to make the world better, and through the course of doing that they hopefully make a good profit. And there's a great book by Andrew Winston and Paul Pullman called Net Positive that give lots of examples of that transformation. And then when we talk about ESG, we're talking about the ways in which companies track progress against that transformation journey. And so I think if you look over the last 2 decades, the talent has shifted from this being quite niche and quite specialist, maybe in the different domains of ESG. So, my career journey started very much at the kind of technical environmental end. And I think the talent journey in the context of that transformation is shifting towards more mainstream skills. So, if you're going to rewire a business, that has implications for marketing or procurement, supply chain. And so we're seeing, the needs for each of those lines of business to build competency in this space and understand what changes are needed.
Yeah. So if I can interject there, I totally agree with where Justin's going. I think ultimately we're coming back around to the term strategy, but how we got here is quite interesting, really, because of course, 20 years ago, if this was mentioned at all, it was called CSR, corporate social responsibility, and it was very peripheral. And the specialist, Justin, you might not agree with me saying this, but my view at the time was, if you were a specialist in what we now call sustainability, you were essentially a technical specialist. And there were actually quite a lot more women who were coming through that route at the time, and it was quite very peripheral, really, to any mainstream business, in a way like HR. Because you reach a certain scale, and it's one of those things that you think, we probably ought to add this on to what we do just to be seen to be doing the right thing. But over time, obviously, it's taken a much more central role in what's happening. Everybody's now talking about it. So I think it's probably 10 years ago that people started calling it ESG. And it's, as you say, migrated across the whole business. And I think Andrew, that's probably where your skill set came in, because at that time people realised that customers wanted people to be able to talk about this, if not materially say what they were doing, then at least say in some way how it mattered to the business. But now it's become so much more deeply embedded across all the different business streams, if you like. I would have said a couple of years ago there was no need for a role of Chief Sustainability Officer anymore, but actually I don't think that's true, because I think it's become such a big topic and so complex, and you do need that seat at the board to make sure it's being done well, that a CSO is a crucial thing to make sure that people are actually staying on track and keeping true to what it means to make the business sustainable.
Yeah, I completely agree with Justin and Anna's points, actually. And funny enough, I was actually thinking of almost some very similar points as well, which was a few years ago, to mention what Anna said, it was known as CSR. It was a bit of a tick box exercise. I was in sales and commercial roles back then, but we were looking at what customers wanted. They had an agenda on CSR to say, what are you doing? But that typically kind of flirted around the edges of volunteering, some environmental pledges, or a few sustainability projects through the supply chain, for example, about improving efficiencies and what have you. So yes, it was an agenda that was important, but it really wasn't the agenda it is today. And it's evolved to this whole kind of disclosure piece, which ESG predominantly refers to. It now galvanizes organizations. You have to have professionals now who come in and who are there to Justin's point, to look at transformation. You've got to look at how you can transition from the old methods and the old traditional ways of working, where a lot of us still are at the moment, to what it looks like in 5, 10, 20 years' time when we have to decarbonize. And you've got these new professionals who really have to be storytellers. They've got to be influencers, they've got to be analysts, they've got to be external voices. You can't just have that specialist, as Anna rightly mentioned it, anymore, who can literally carbon account and they're really good. You do need those, and there's an absolute place for them. But depending on your resource or the quantity of resource that you can get, you do need somebody who can galvanize that organization, get people inspired, but also influence at such a level that really does change the system, and it changes how a company views what their actions have on the wider society, whether it's carbon, whether it's social, etc. Mm-hmm. So I think that it really has evolved from that more specialist area to a lot more inspirational leadership, mm-hmm. and somebody who can connect different teams and departments throughout the organization, whether that's locally, globally, or cross industries. And it really does feel like that role has, although these roles are evolving and are a lot broader than they ever were before.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point, because we see so much being driven from the consumer side of things, and this awareness of how you take things to the top table and how you can actually start to make change, and how sustainability is not just a subset, it's actually something that can be weaved in through a whole organization, around transformation around a whole organization. Yes, there's still those elements of it being kind of on the corner. We need to do a little bit of greenwashing around X, Y, and Z, and some companies may continue to play that way, but to really make change and change for the better, it should be at the forefront. And to be able to have the right skills to be able to bring that to the forefront, to have those intelligent conversations in the right way, is being able to speak maybe a different language and have a slightly wider or broader skill set than if you are just a technical expert, which is still really important. So you need to have those technical expertise, but maybe they sort of sit in a slightly different place, rather than sort of being able to bring those emotional intelligence skills that I think we've talked about before to the top table, where you can have those conversations and say, okay, I've got a proposal for making this particular project, be able to take the buy-in for those projects. It's not just about why you think it's going to be a change for the greater good in terms of environmental impact or carbon impact, but what's the impact on bottom line? What's the impact on performance, employee performance, retention, all those sorts of things, which are the more business corporate skills that will help you be able to kind of land that proposal where you want it to be. Yeah. And I think it's a slightly different skill set than maybe what one would have originally have thought about when you entered the space maybe 10 years ago, or maybe, you know, you guys have more experience of sort of seeing people coming in at a more junior level now of what kind of skills they bring to the table. Do you see it sort of being much more technical, or is it much wider?
So I kicked it off really quickly. I'll be quite brief. I see people coming in predominantly with the passion, actually, and that's one of the things that I look for the most. Because yes, you can have somebody with the technical experience or the a previous exposure to these roles, and that is important. There is an absolute space for that. But actually, for me, it's about the passion that they have to really make a change. And sometimes they're quite junior, so you can't expect them to have the experience or exposure that you might want them to have in their role. So I don't play that as the biggest card in my hand. I look for whether they've got that passion, whether they've got that adaptability, whether they can flex. I talk a lot about personality styles, and I hinge a lot of it on actually the questions that they ask. If somebody doesn't ask any questions at an interview stage and doesn't show that curiosity, then I'm concerned. If somebody has a list of pre-filled out questions and fires them at me, then I look for that as somebody willing to learn, somebody that's really looking to ask those questions because there's a curiosity that they need satisfying. So for me, it's probably more the emotional intelligence skills and the capability or capacity really to kind of learn. That's what I look for. Obviously, if I'm looking for someone in carbon accounting and carbon footprinting, then yes, okay, of course, there'll be some past experience that would be helpful, but I taught myself how to do that. And it got signed off. It gets signed off every year by Deloitte, so therefore it can be learned. So I don't use that as something that is a hindrance for them.
I think we're talking from the same hymn sheet, actually. Caroline, perhaps you needed a more diverse group of people in this conversation. But I would say, I mean, the small consulting firm that I've done some work with recently, they've brought in some phenomenally talented young people who've come out of Imperial and UCL and LSE. I'm sure there's lots of places that are running great courses for master's degrees and so on at the moment. But fundamentally, it's the ability to be curious, because this field moves so quickly that there's no point in saying that your skill set in 8 points of time is the one that you need, because we all know how much has changed in the past 10 years, let alone the past 20, and looking forwards, it's going to change some more. So what you want is that willingness to say, okay, I want to do good things here. I know that things are going to change. Give me the opportunity and I'll make sure that I stay abreast of what's happening.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
I think maybe I could just add a couple of points. I think, 20 years ago, this was not an established career path. I remember when I took my job at this retailer, my job title was environmental specialist, and they really didn't know where to put me. The CEO had appointed me, and so they put me in the HR department. And I kind of sat between HR and training, and that was fine. And it was,
safety. Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I fell in love with the HR manager, and we're married now and have 3 kids. It was definitely a good outcome from that.
It worked out really well.
Yeah. But I think now for talent coming into the market, there's been an explosion in the range of opportunities. There's just so many roles now, which is fantastic, and also the supply of talent. That there weren't sustainability related degrees that you could take back in the late 1990s. There were quite technical courses you could do, but there's now, as several of the other panelists have mentioned, there's some great universities churning out fantastic programs, which has really improved the quality of talent that's coming into the market.
Mm-hmm. But it kind of leads me on to one of my questions that I had next, which was around the customer side of things, and in different ways you deal with sort of customers or have that customer facing role. And I think, Anna, we were talking the other day about one of the things that you're involved in is making decisions around pensions, and how you help how Camden invest their pension fund, which is a huge amount of money. And I think it'd be interesting to know, from the employee perspective, how much awareness is there from their side around how you're investing, how they, you know, what you're doing around sustainability and carbon impact. Is that to what degree does that influence the investment decisions that you make, and therefore how much knowledge does you and your team need to have? Obviously, you're a bit of an advantage on that, around how to be able to manage that side of things when it comes to you having those conversations with fund managers, and how that may have changed over time in terms of their level of experience and expertise to be able to have the conversations that you need for you to be able to get the reassurance that you're making those right investment decisions for your stakeholders.
So this has been fascinating as part of my role, but I don't think I even knew 2.5 years ago when I was elected councillor that that I could get involved in this at such a, you know, a detailed level. In terms of consumer driven decisions, I wouldn't say the pension investment stuff is actually driven by the members of the pension fund. I would say Camden is very much driven by wanting to remove carbon from, you know, from everything it does, basically, as far as possible. We have a net zero 2030 ambition, which I'm currently tasked with helping to put on a positive path, should I say. But the overall, I mean, we've had a very public engagement in the borough on what does it mean for us here to be doing these things, and a lot of people have become involved, for example, in making sure that we've got lots of cycleways and that we are removing cars from the road, and, you know, the stuff that you can kind of see in our physical local environment, but that hasn't necessarily filtered through into consumers or members of the pension fund determining what they think we ought to be investing in. This has really been driven by members of the pension committee, of whom I am one, led by somebody who is a professional in the investment field anyway. He happens to be a councillor too. Just thinking, we've got an opportunity here to be focusing a substantial sum of money into doing something that is at least positive net benefit to our local environment and global environment, and at best incrementally, you know, additional to whatever's being done already. You know, £2 billion pension fund is enough money to get started in the first instance, and we have an annual meeting to decide what our investment priorities are, which is led by somebody who's incredible, one called Karen Shackleton, who runs a small company called Pensions for Purpose. So these organisations are out there. She helps us go through, work out what our priorities would be in terms of sustainable development goals, and therefore, you know, where we'd like to apply our capital when we're changing the profile of our fund, which obviously is something we don't do too reactively, because pension funds are substantial things and you mustn't mess with them too much, but we can migrate over time to what we want it to look like. But in addition to that, we are also part of something that's called the London Community Investment Vehicle, which is a £32 billion fund. And as vocal members of that community, we get to influence what the decisions are for £32 billion worth of investments. And that's been thrilling, quite honestly, because they've responded so positively to our impetus to, you know, we want to put the money into things that are going to do incremental good, whether that's in creation of social housing and energy efficient social housing, or into renewable energy, or I wouldn't say we divest much, but we do try and influence voting patterns when it comes to general meetings of the companies that we are ultimately investing in. So we try not to divest because we try to influence companies to do better, rather than to, you know, say, well, we've taken umbrage and we're pulling out. It happens occasionally, but not very often. So we are, you know, collectively this massive force for changing a whole approach to investing. And I think if we can do that, then that's, you know, something that we can hopefully spread good practice about across the country and potentially more widely as well. So I think for me, the opportunities that have come out of looking at sustainability have taken me in directions that I would not have anticipated previously. Don't know if that answers all of your questions, Caroline, about about what the pension fund can do and you know, the skill set I bring to it. I mean, perhaps the other thing to mention is that I've seen a massive evolution in it in the past 2 years, ever since I've been involved, which is a tiny amount of time, but at the start, 2 years ago, I would say the investment managers were bringing maybe a very junior team member to talk about sustainability, and they were showing us a few charts about why their fund is doing the right thing. They couldn't necessarily describe what the thresholds were for the charts and why they put money in a particular company and not into other places. But I would say now, when the investment teams come and talk to us, it's the lead in the team who's talking about sustainability, and they're talking about the fundamental purpose of what they're investing in, not necessarily just about the characteristics of it, if that makes sense. So it's really evolving so quickly.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because that sort of it being sustainability being that subset, and sort of even sort of pension funds that invested had socially responsible sort of screening criteria is a very small part of the bigger picture. And now if your investment, your fund manager is coming along to meetings and being able to engage at a very with the right knowledge and expertise around sustainability, and to have that conversation with you and answer the questions around why these investment decisions were made, what's their criteria, what's happening around X, Y, and Z in that field of sustainability, is a huge change from even 5 years.
I would say just add one thing to it. In fact, it started off us asking them for these things. They're now coming to us to offer them. So tomorrow I'm going to a workshop on sustainable agriculture, which I don't know very much about at all. So that'll be a real eye-opener, but presumably somebody wants to sell me something.
Yeah. There you go. Justin, how about from your side, sort of, from the data storage, data management side, what changes have you seen in sort of the level of expertise and knowledge and requirements and questions that customers are asking you, and what they're asking for over time?
Sure. Well, I think the economics of this space have changed considerably. So the business cases have got tighter for companies to invest in this space. And I think that's really driven probably by kind of 3 areas. One is questions around resilience for their business, and resilience in the broader sense. So that could be, is your business resilient to emerging regulations, which have really started to tighten? If you look at things like CSRD in Europe, which is the Sustainability Reporting Directive, or if you're in kind of retail and consumer products, the deforestation regulations in Europe. So understanding and being able to anticipate those regulations is a form of resilience. And then also physical climate risk. We have a lot of companies who are feeling the consequences of the impacts of extreme weather, maybe in their operations or their supply chain. So how can they build resilience to those types of risks? The second is just where, we've seen an energy crisis in Europe. We've seen kind of inflationary pressures. How can they be more efficient in their use of energy, of resources? How do they minimize waste? How do they embrace kind of circularity concepts to drive out cost? So that second bucket around not necessarily transforming the business, but just being more efficient is a big driver. And then the third is, as industries transition, there are whole new value pools that are opening up. I mean, if you look at the power utility sector that I know well, we've seen values shift towards the consumer with, renewable energy, with electric vehicles. We've seen the emergence of a more intelligent energy system. All of these open up new opportunities for companies who've got, maybe products or technologies that take advantage of that transition. And we're going to see, every industry is transitioning. And so that's opening up all sorts of new areas of growth for companies. So those 3 drivers, kind of resilience, efficiency, and growth, are what's prompting companies to reach out to us to see if they can embrace some of the technologies that we have.
Yeah. That's great. And Andy, what about from your perspective? Do you see something similar as well?
Sorry, is this from a customer perspective, or which angle? Sorry, would you like to look at that?
So from the sort of the change in consumer in customer knowledge and experience and knowledge and expertise around sustainability, and how that's driving change within your business, or what you're having to deliver in terms of sustainability.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. So yes, it has evolved quite drastically, actually. So like I mentioned in my preamble at the beginning, I went from being a sales leader, sitting in front of some senior people at a customer level, and having these questions asked of us and without the answer. And that's quite an awkward position to be put in. But what it did give me insight or a window into was the fact that it's a bigger agenda within the customer world. It's become more and more important to them, and they had subsequently started introducing more and more experts to really start narrowing down with the likes of ourselves and other suppliers on what was your agenda, how do we work with this. So yeah, let's take it back as well. Customers like the NHS, Amazon, Asda, Tesco, we all know these kind of big entities, and we are in the pharmaceutical space suppliers to these customers. And they've got huge kind of social pressures and demands on them from the general public or from government, because they are such big, powerful players and they can make such a big difference. So actually what we found was that they were transferring this kind of social and governmental pressure downwards into industry. And they were going one by one to different industries and really putting the demands and pressure. And essentially, they're looking to manage their scoped emissions. And we are a huge part of their scope 3, which is the lion's share of their carbon footprint. And therefore, the demands came to us very specifically on exactly what they wanted us to achieve, what they wanted us to do, by when, or else you might not have a business with them. You might not be able to be a partner with them in the long term. So actually, we're really fortunate, actually, in many ways, not because they were putting a lot of pressure, but because they were really specific in what they wanted. And we were able to really use that. I was able to really use that information, go back into our business and say, we have to evolve. This is how we need to transform. This is what we need to deliver. And therefore, this is the plan of action. So yeah, it's become really clear from that kind of customer angle. They're developing their expertise. We need to do the same. And yeah, that's how we've used that as our blueprint, essentially, one of our blueprints to really evolve.
Yeah. I think if we kind of go back and look at sort of the skill set and, you know, what one needs to play in this space or to work in this space, what do you think if you were somebody, you know, if you were talking to somebody who was just finished their masters in environmental management or technology, and they wanted to work in this space and eventually take on a role as a CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer, at some point in their career? That was their ultimate kind of destination. What do you think are the key skills that they need to be able to enter and navigate the sustainability and ESG space? I'll open it out to anyone who'd like to answer that.
I'm happy to kind of just give an opinion there. I did touch on some earlier, so I'm afraid I might repeat myself a little bit, but no apologies really. Look, it's really important that, in my opinion, they've gone in there with, yes, like the passion, like I said, this passion, this thirst to expand their knowledge, but also to influence transformation within organizations. But I genuinely, and I might be a little bit biased here, that I think they need that exposure to the organization. You know, whether that's being fundamental in some sort of commercial role, quite senior in some sort of commercial role, be that marketing, sales, commercial strategy, supply chain, one of these roles that enables them to get that pivot position within an organization, that you can look in any direction and understand how an organization's rhythm works, how they can understand P&L management, so that they can really understand what part each department can play within this journey, but they've put themselves in there and they know how to operate within that. Because the other one that's really going to be the most important skill set moving forward is that influencing piece. And that is influencing up, down, sideways, left, right, throughout. It's really important that they can tell those stories and influence those teams and individuals, but also that flexibility, because they need to be able to do that in a different way. A very quick story I'll finish on was I was selling this sustainability story to my organization 3 years ago, and it just wasn't sitting in the way that I wanted it to. It wasn't landing in the way that I wanted it to. In fact, we kept getting no's from the board. And I flipped it. I flipped it from an opportunity to do what was the right thing, this whole conscientious thing. I flipped it to, if we don't do this, we are screwed. And excuse my language, but it was a case of, this is a commercially imperative decision we need to make in an organization. If we don't do things, these are the consequences. This is a timeline that you can expect those to be landing. But we have the solution. So it was almost the same story reshaped and reframed. And I'm not saying, well, I have to kind of blow my own trumpet a little bit for this. I had the experience and exposure in the organization to understand that you have to change your narrative sometimes. You have to change your tact. You have to kind of come back a little bit to be able to move forward. And I think that that's the thing that's going to be really important. You can't just go a straight line through sustainability, in my opinion. I think you do need that broader exposure to an organization so you really understand how it works and that you can have that agility when the time comes.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I really like where Andy's coming from on that one, actually, because I think the influencing skills are absolutely essential. I'd add that I think a degree of analytical and critical thinking is also essential, because otherwise you are not going to see the wood for the trees, what's meaningful and what's not. And as a strategist, I would of course also say you need to see what the strategic plays are here. But the thing that I'm really curious about just what you said, Andy, is you had to switch the narrative. I would always have hoped, it makes me sound naive perhaps, but that saying, look, there's an opportunity here. We can rethink our business model. We can rethink what we're doing. We can deliver good and we can deliver, product at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We can do both. But I'm really, surprised to hear that you had to turn it around and make it quite so stick rather than carrot in order for the message to get through.
It's true, Anna, and I was quite frustrated in having to do that, but I recognised that 2 or 3 times knocking on the door with a slightly reshaped opportunity, it was a case of, no, it's got to be a bit more shocking now. There's got to be a lot more on the line, and I don't mean to be rude. People who sit on boards tend to have a lot of, let's call it ego, or a lot more to lose. So I thought I'd play against that nature, and had to sell through a big risk if you don't act, rather than the huge opportunity by acting. It was frustrating, but it worked, sadly.
Well, when you talked about the risk, did you talk about it? Was it focused more on the financial risk if you didn't act? So it was more of a kind of, this is what the impact on the bottom line will be if we don't do this, rather than this is the opportunity we can make X if we go into this area. It's more about this is what you'll lose financially.
There was a big financial risk. There was also the reputational risk, and then there was the social risk. So I was very aware to not just talk about this as a financial exercise, because that was never going to get their heads away from it being a financial exercise. So we did talk about reputational risk and social challenges.
Okay, great.
Caroline, perhaps I can just add that I think there's, from a skills point of view, there's a unique combination of breadth and depth, which I think, both Anna and Andy are essentially saying, like, I think you need breadth when it comes to kind of those core business and strategy skills. Mm-hmm. So, we talked about analytics and influencing. I think structured communication, problem solving, being able to write business cases, those core skills are really important. Being entrepreneurial, that commercial mindset. And then I think having some depth in specific areas can help be an important differentiator. So, the issue, I think one of the challenges coming into the job market with sustainability is there are so many topics. And there was a time 10, 15 years ago where you could just about get by on each of these kind of key areas, but actually they've become very sophisticated in their own rights. If you think about the depth and sophistication of carbon accounting or human rights. And so if you think of a matrix of kind of industry and sustainability topic, which are the couple of boxes in that matrix that you're going to really have a lot of depth in? And that will both influence who you want to work with and then what you can bring to complement those broader skill sets.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, one of the things is, one of those questions is around, I had originally on my list of questions was, what's the best route, kind of being a generalist or being a technical expertise? And actually, I think they just take you on different paths, really. There's, I don't think this conversation says that, if you have that technical expertise or interest that you're never going to get to a CSO place, or also have senior a senior, you know, have a place where you can really have a platform to make change. It just means it's a different place that you're making that change from, to if you're a generalist and you've come in from a different route. There's not, one is not better than the other. I think they're just very different routes to different places. And I think that's something to be recognised, being very clear about what you want to do. And that can change as you go through, and you can work your way through this sector and, you know, what you want to do. But you might start off being a generalist and realising that carbon is what you're really fascinated by, and you love everything to do with carbon accounting and carbon footprinting and carbon trading, and that's sort of where you want to be. That's going to take you on a different path to if you're wanting to be at the table making transformational changes around a business and trying to weave sustainability into the DNA of that business. It's a different path. It's a different path. One is not better than the other. It's just a different path. And I think that's something to recognize, just trying to think more about kind of what you want to do and what that path could look like for you to get there. And it could change, and it could definitely evolve. Yeah. I think if I was to kind of have one more question, we've got some questions on our Q&A. I think if there was one thing, if you that you know now that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career, what would that be? And if I put it out to each of you to say, what would that be? And I will start with you.
Okay, I mean, it's not necessarily even sustainability related. In terms of sustainable career, maybe it is. I would like to have known earlier on that life is not such a straightforward path. I've said that a couple of times now, but it isn't. And you can't necessarily plan for everything that happens, but you can prepare yourself well. So I've again said this before, but I'm an opportunist. I've tried to equip myself with a set of skills that follow my interests, and I think are widely enough applicable that when something's coming along, I can kind of jump on the train and catch it. And that's definitely what I've done for going to business school, for being elected as a councillor, you know, job opportunity. I found my first job, believe it or not, through the Times, and my second job through the Economist. It was just stuff that popped up, and I was like, well, that's interesting, and I kind of fit it enough to give it a go. But I think the one thing I would have taught myself earlier is to, when you're thinking that you might be on the cusp of a change, talk to the people around you as much as you can, because they can probably see opportunities and ways through situations or ways out of situations that you're not aware of. Ask for the help before you need it.
Yeah,
that would be my lesson.
Yeah, it's useful advice. Very good advice. Yeah. Justin, what would be the one thing for you?
I think it would be being confident in your conviction.
Yeah.
Because I just remember for so long doors being slammed in my face, being told there's no business case, this isn't relevant, we'll never see the growth in renewable energy, or we'll never see EVs get taken up, etc., etc. And just I wish I could say to myself back then, just be tougher with the naysayers, be brave, you know, follow your conviction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Andy, anything to add?
Well, I love those examples, and I wish I'd come up with them myself. But I kind of picked a we, not me type thing here, which is it's everyone's responsibility. And I think earlier in my career, I kind of was this super passionate, super creative energy that kind of was going off doing stuff in a good way. But I kind of took too much of the burden on my own shoulders, and should really have opened it up sooner and really embraced the fact that this is everyone together. This is, you know, not just the passionate few, it's everyone's responsibility. And actually, how do we share everyone's opportunity, or the opportunity for everyone? Now everyone's got their own roles. I get that. And that's why I kind of probably took the burden on myself. But I would love to have said to Andy a few years ago, do you know what? Let's open this up sooner and enjoy the ride and involve everyone.
Yeah. That's great. Fantastic bits of advice. Thank you. Well, thank you, Anna, Justin, and Andy, for being part of this discussion. I think it's been a great opportunity to chat to you all, and I really enjoyed it. We do have a few questions that have come through, so I will just run through them. So first one we've got is, what certifications can a senior finance manager undertake in order to transition to being a sustainability champion? Interesting. Yeah. Anybody like to contribute to that at all, or have an answer? I mean, I don't think there's I think from the discussion, from what I think we've said, is that there's, well, Andy, I'll let you carry on with that one.
Look, certification. I mentioned at the beginning. I did this Cambridge Institute of Sustainable Leadership course. It's not just for sustainability professionals. It's for anyone, any leader, any senior leader can do it. For me, you do get a certificate, you do get some sort of qualification, but it's one of those programs where you get exposed to the breadth of this topic, but you also get the access to the experts and a huge alumni. And I think if you're really interested in this, push yourself out of your comfort zone, do a course like that, which is quite all encompassing. I think it takes 8 weeks, and it involves a lot of extracurricular work, but the exposure and experience you can get out of it is phenomenal.
So Andy, did you do that before you worked in the sustainability role? You did that, okay, after.
I did this in April.
Okay, right, great. So there's quite a few of them around, I know, in the UK. But sometimes also, I think, you said you'd already transitioned into that space, into the sustainability space without having a qualification in that space. I know Justin and I have the, masters in environmental type management sort of degrees. Anna, you're a scientist, so you don't necessarily need to have a qualification to be in this space. And as I think we've discussed, it's being passionate about it, being open to it, trying to see those opportunities that may exist within an organization. But there are some benefits from taking other certifications as well that could help. Yeah.
I'm sure certification. Sorry, Justin, go ahead. Go on.
Thanks, Anna. I was just going to say that I think, Atuya, your question about finance, I would probably look at what professional bodies that you're close to in your space are providing, because that's a good place to start. So, if it's the Association of Chartered Accountants, for example, have they got a program that they're running? And then think about the areas that you want to go deep in, and then look for courses that are available. And actually, there's a lot of stuff online. So like, for example, if you're interested in greenhouse gas accounting, the greenhouse gas protocol has a whole bunch of online free courses that you can do that do include certifications at the end. So there's so much out there. It's probably a matter of focusing on what you need most readily to your role. But I do agree with Andy, like some of these university programs like Oxford and Cambridge that offer these broad introductions are also really very useful.
Yeah, I could definitely see a purpose for taking one of the courses that you're referencing there. I would also say, though, that as somebody who's a finance professional already, you get a lot of perspective on where the money is being spent. And if you can just start by asking questions, not necessarily even with a view to getting a qualification in anything related, but ask questions about why money is being spent in a particular way. If you've got a kind of inkling that something could be done differently, then you can start proposing different solutions anyway. So you're kind of working your way into it through the knowledge of what sits on the P&L and the balance sheet. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. The skills that you get from being being able to kind of break down that balance sheet, being able to account and your reports to sort of kind of see those trails and follow those trails. Yeah, I think that's a great skill to have in the first place. So the next question that we've got is, so narratives can change from opportunities to crisis mitigation, but for each, what ROI metric templates could you use? ROI being financial or other, any examples would be appreciated. Anyone like to take the lead on that?
I'm happy to kind of give some examples of my experience on this one. That having a commercial understanding, so you understand the P&L, you understand the difference between the top line risk and the bottom line risk, is really important. So you can use your standard templates. I could go into something quite complicated, which is value balancing, but I don't think it's necessarily a conversation for the last 6 minutes. But it's a methodology that has been created to take sustainability actions and impacts and put a cash value to them. So it's a very academic process, but what it can do is bring social impacts onto the P&L, and you can start looking at a profit of a project versus the negative impacts from a social impact or an environmental impact, and what that looks like from a cash. If you're interested in that can be done. we're lucky in my industry. We talk to our customers a lot. We talk to our partners and stakeholders a lot. So we get a lot of internal, I guess, questionnaires or surveys coming out, and we ask specific questions about sustainability, or customers may ask about CSR or sustainability. So you can get a very tangible score there on how they view you. So it would depend on the messages you're giving out versus what you're going to get back. But that's something that's very real, and it's very good to be able to use that, because, you know, honestly, using what customers think of you internally, especially upwards, very powerful. And then there's a number of other things, but I don't want to kind of take too much time away from others.
Thank you.
I think the one big change that I think we're seeing is companies have access to much better data now to make decisions. And we're seeing companies move from using kind of spreadsheets to using SaaS solutions to help them decide where to invest to drive, you know, a step change or a performance improvement against, you know, an ESG metric. Within Google Cloud, we are partnered with a company called Watershed, which is a SaaS solution for ESG analytics. And they will provide kind of, once they've got your data, they will help you understand what are the next best actions.
Right.
How can you evaluate them with their cost and benefits? So I would encourage Martin to look at those types of tools.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah. Great. I think those were our questions that came through. I think we can come to an end now, but thank you very much to Anna, to Andy and Justin for joining us for this conversation. I really enjoyed discussing all of this with you for the last 55 minutes. This recording will be made available on the Oxford HR website, so please feel free to share it. And once again, thank you very much, and look forward to speaking to you all very soon. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.